Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jake Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
I'm traveling again, so
Where are you at?
I'm still in Vancouver, but I'm off to the UK to give a keynote, so that's pretty nice.
What is? Let's plug the place, the conference you're going to.
Sure, it's called Pick Up a Penny, and it is.
Oh, what is her name?
Whose name?
Oh, it's a lady that we've had on the show before. Where my bad Jay will know. He just.
Okay.
Here he is. We'll start that again once he gets in.
Okay. Looks like you had a rough night.
I didn't. I still didn't recover from election night.
Yeah.
I was, that's like my Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, Jay. Dr. Marie, I think you need a new laptop because your disk space is full. Your camera keeps going out. Buy a new laptop, I promise you.
Oh yeah. Sorry here. I hear you. It's just I've got this, well, supposedly super duper one. I love these tough books. They're the good ones are hard to get by and cost $5 million. So
Okay.
Anywho.
Hey, Jay, listen where Dr. Marie's at, and you got to help me with the name of the person that's doing this event.
Yeah, I'm about to fly off to Pick Up a Penny in Newcastle. They work with a lot of neurodivergent children, so children with autism. I'm not sure whether we call ADHD neurodivergent. I've got to be really careful about that popular term now. Let's just say children that can benefit a lot from neurotherapy. But I'm there to talk about the effects of interactive screen-based technology used too much, too soon, and how it can negatively affect the projection of development. So
Sarah Young, we had her on in 2021.
Okay.
Give her a big shout out, and I got to blow off the dust and see what I looked like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I think I had my COVID look.
Oh, didn't we all?
No.
Oh, yeah.
You never know what my past pictures look like with or without or with or without. You never know.
Pre-post auction.
And definitely without or anyway.
So Jay and Dr. Marie, I'm just still having a hard time, because I'm in the political frame of mind, and I there we go. Here, let me snap the fingers. Boom. All right, you're back.
I'll just keep my finger on this. Yeah.
Senator of Pennsylvania had a stroke. He was on Joe Rogan, and politics, of course, has been top of mind, whatever side that you're on. And Pennsylvania was a swing state, so the senator that's in charge of, one of the two senators in the state, and he had a stroke. He didn't really step down. He kept going. And during the interview with Joe Rogan, he had to stop because his closed caption stopped working, which makes me wonder, put my tinfoil hat on. That can't be a good thing. What happened to him? Can we talk about that to put my fears at ease?
Sure. First of all, he had a stroke, which was due to not like hypertension and a blowout of a blood vessel, but he had atrial fibrillation, which allows the heart to collect small clots, and they float out. They may go out your arm, you don't have a stroke. They may go up into the brain, you have a stroke. And it essentially briefly chokes off the blood flow to an area, so you have an ischemic area. And he was wise enough to listen to his wife, and she insisted that he go in for care. They gave him a quick scan because if you're having a stroke symptom, they have to find out whether it's a bleed or a clot. If it's a clot or a thrombosis, they can give you a clot buster drug and it dissolves the clot and you revascularize the cortex. So the stroke's damage is minimized. Well, he didn't get there soon enough to avoid any and all. He had some probably brain stem or auditory cortex damage. Now, that goofs up sound, but it doesn't necessarily make you stupid. It just makes you incapable of piecing together what you hear properly. So a secondary pathway can be used. People that have hearing difficulties turn on closed captioning on the TV so they can follow the show. And that's essentially what he was doing. He was using the closed captioning to validate and make sure he was tracking and following everything. And he's fairly dependent on that visual input to validate and keep his auditory perception straight because he's going to misperceive. Now, let's take a little look at. So here's the midline. First of all, my
Bad art.
apologies.
Okay.
Yeah. This is bad art. Here's the midline of the brain, the frontal lobe coming across the temporal lobe, and it's not proportionate very well. But at the back end of the sylvian fissure, on the temporal side, is the auditory cortex, but the pyramidal cells are pointed this way. They're not pointed out. You don't see them in the temporal area. You see them at the top of your head at CZ. In fact, if you're going to the hospital, they hook up an electrode at CZ, reference points on the two ears, and a ground on the forehead. That's the entire electrode array, and they're looking for this waveform, which represents everything from the tympanic membrane vibrating to the bones in the inner ear to the cochlea pons, all the way to the thalamus and the medial geniculate to the cortex. So this goes from the wiggling of the sound on the tympanic membrane all the way to the cortical arrival. It's not event related potentials after it's arrived in the cortex. It's just getting it there. Now, this is how the hospital decides whether the infant or the adult is deaf from the the bones in the inner ear failing, too much fluid in the ear. Occasionally an infant when tested they don't get a response out of the cochlea, and they know they're going to have a cochlear implant. So each one of these waves represents a step in this processing up the brainstem and then through the thalamus up to the cortex. So they're looking for this, and he's got, one of these waves is goofed up enough so that he's not hearing accurately enough for him to be totally dependent on the sound itself. So he integrates the sound and also sight. Now, the sound gets to CZ. Well, CZ, PZ area is sensory integration. That's where auditory, somatosensory, vision, all of your sensations come together for a sensory integration, and then they're comprehended in Wernicke's area. So what we have here is, well, I messed up my art somehow, but my art wasn't good in the first place. But what we basically have is sensory integration, receiving, vision, and audition. He's dependent on the vision input to verify his auditory input. So as soon as he doesn't have the visual, he's going to stop and make sure that he's still on track. I mean, it'd be like taking an artificial leg away from somebody who's doing a run. I mean, he's dependent upon the support of the artificial leg. Well, you can't do that. And here we have a senator who's dependent upon the added benefit of vision as well as audition in order to perceive what's going on. Now, it doesn't mean he can't have conversations, but when it's a critical circumstance where you really need to know exactly exactly what is going on. And by the way, beards come naturally in my family, obviously. Uh, um, uh, I think I might a little bit shorter than his, but a little bit more mass in it. Who knows, you know? But he was old. I'm only 75, so. Um,
You're spring chicken.
but poor John had a stroke, and it doesn't make him incapable of making decisions. He's still mentally intact. He's just got a sensory processing problem. And in a school setting, they would give him an accommodation, and he would have the ability to have written instructions instead of auditory, verbal instructions. So yeah, we make accommodations for our friends who have disabilities, and he's got one.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, can you do the job? That's all, So basically what
Well,
you're saying is chill out.
yeah.
Hey, I come from North Dakota. We had Senator Burdick, and if you flip back through the history books to Senator Burdick's term, he was in Congress forever, and he had heart attacks and strokes. He was incapable of speaking. His staff was doing everything for him. He was a veg at the end. But as long as he was alive, like many of the senators, barely alive, uh, they get old and incompetent, and they're still there. You know, it's hard to get out of the Senate. You're there for 6 years. During 6 years, a lot of shit can happen.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of them that end up having medical messes, and uh, they they're not even able to attend the Senate for month after month after month, and they still have their job. Now, there's probably a point at which uh, the rest of the senators should think twice about being that lenient. But you know, it's a good old boys club or a good old person's club, and uh, they take care of their own. So
I'm going to throw my oar in the water here. Like, first of all, Pete, unfortunately, I have to qualify because of my registration. I'm not permitted to comment on a specific person that I have not met or treated. So I'm going
Really
to
noted.
talk generally. But yeah, generally what we're talking about, as I said, with Jay is terms, the variance of people, whether it's due to something we're born with or some kind of incident or accident or event within our bodies or our lives. And when we talk about accommodation, there's a big difference between somebody not being able to do the volume of work. So when you hear a school accommodation, some of them are because you can't do the volume of work, sometimes because you can't understand the work. So there's those type of accommodations. My understanding is in this type of event, you're not talking about an individual's inability to understand. You're talking about a method by which they understand. And one of the methods isn't accessible, but there are other ways that an individual can understand. So for example, if somebody is deaf, yes, they read. They read Braille. Sorry, I was talking about blind there. So if somebody is deaf, they can read lips, they can read words, etc. It doesn't have anything in 99.99% of the cases to do with the capacity to understand or to follow or to do one's job. They just need, as Jay said, that extra leg or that extra something. Now, I'm going to get a little bit political as, the outsider here in the US. I mean, you're dealing with a culture now that's propagating the mockery of individuals who do not have an ability, or if you want to look at it from the other side, who have a disability. So I think, part of that is the culture that the US is walking through. And the other component is not understanding. Was it on the news anywhere saying, okay, yes, this individual needs to read to ensure they're processing well, but it's not an issue in terms of their comprehension. Like, how was this addressed in the public? How was it addressed by the party that he was running for versus not? And if this was going to have such a big political impact, that should be part of it. You let people know there's a reason why this person is sitting down. It's not because they're lazy, it's because they don't have a leg, and if they're going to move with the crowd, they need a chair, with some wheels on it, right? So that's my big spiel there. We need a better effort to educate people if we're going to have a public servant that has something
Yeah.
different going on.
Now, you did hypothesize that we have culture,
Mm.
and our culture is yogurt.
Yeah.
I mean, that maybe kefir, but not. We don't really have culture in a way
Yeah.
that people think of culture,
Yeah.
and our
Well, I mean, I don't want
our
to beat up the
country's.
US too much. It's not just the US. Yours has just been publicized worldwide. I mean, we do have issues, but I also
Oh,
think it's our
the issues are
responsibility.
you have the truth over here, and then you have the filtering process,
Yeah.
whatever that is, national news, and then you have the end user that gets it. That's the problem. And that's
Yeah.
why Joe Rogan is picked up in popularity for you can talk to somebody for 2 hours, 3 hours versus an 8 minute snippet
Yeah.
to better understand the issue. So you can hear you can hear what's going on and make your own judgment versus relying on an editor. And I think that's the problem that we have. So that's kind of why I asked the question, because it's being put out there, and we have 60 minutes if we want to be able to say, look, this is what it is, not an issue. Because there's been instances where Franklin Delano Roosevelt, okay, he hid his disability. Okay, Grover Cleveland, I believe he had a stroke, and his wife had to carry out the presidency. And you don't hear about this stuff,
Yeah,
and they weren't voted in. So that's kind of where you know, if you have a stroke, there be something out there that proves that you're competent to do it if you're an elected official or you're operating heavy machinery, unless you're
Well,
in North
let's be
Dakota.
wise about this. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that, I know it's not politically correct to say so, but depending on what we're talking about, there are certain things you can't do. And that should be respected. But there are many things that people are excluded from that have nothing to do with their ability to do them. It's the public's appearance or distortion of what they can or can't
yeah,
do. But I mean, we're also talking about larger culture. I mean, we can loop this right back into the bigger picture of mental health. People are afraid to speak at work about some things that are going on
yeah,
when they should, and they should get quote unquote accommodations. And we go all the way to the other side of absolute complete abuse, wherein people are taking advantage of systems of kindness and accommodations. I think we have to put that all on the table and kind of make this a
yeah.
spectrum.
Institutions in
Sense.
general tend to be self-protective,
Hmm.
and it's not just Congress. You can go
Yeah,
to city council meetings and find some incompetent
yeah.
person who's been elected, and they're up there. They can't understand the discussion. They go off on tangents. That
And you just elected one.
obviously demented, and but they're still there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
now,
All right.
Well,
If you've had enough politics, I have one more question for you all, but I'll let you go, Dr. Marie, if you have something.
okay. I can hang out for a bit, but
All
yeah.
right, all right. So, quick question: sleep apnea.
Mm.
You got to do a sleep test. There's a couple tests that are out there. One seems to be pretty simple. You just put something on your finger to pick up the oxygen, something on the throat to pick up the breathing. You get an app to get the results, send it into the doctor, and you find out how many interrupted events that you have.
Mhm.
What is the difference between that and actually going into the clinic, Jay, which you've talked out a bunch of times, what I believe you said you operated some.
Yeah,
What are they measuring at night? Because they put sensors on the head. What are they measuring?
sure.
Yeah, what's going on with that?
All that simple screening is going to do is tell you that there's an apnea. They won't necessarily be able to tell you whether it's obstructive or central necessarily,
Mhm.
um, and they won't tell you whether it's positional.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
put on body position. Well, you obstruct, but it's only when you're laying on your back,
Yeah.
and it's obstructive. Um, uh,
Jay, can I
that
jump in there before you get into the science? Because we can just wipe out, again, I'm not sure the percentages, but just for,
Nobody's fact
sake of
checking,
saying it,
just throwing
yeah,
out there.
yeah, that's true. I'm just going to say around 75% of individuals, you're talking about individuals who have obstruction when they lie on their backs. And so much money is spent on this, and so many of those machines are spent. And I think it's a racket for anybody who's listening here. Yes, I will give counsel. Everybody knows somebody within their circle who wears stockings. Get an old pair of stockings, get some kind of tennis ball or any type of ball, put it, tie two knots at the top of the legs, okay? And at the top of the legs, put your tennis ball in and tie up the waistline and put it around your back, okay? It costs you nothing depending if you have it in your household, or maybe $5 if you have to go out and buy it. Tie it around your waist and you'll roll over, so you won't get in that position to
yeah,
snore. You'll save marriages, you'll save your brain. And for so many people, this is all that's needed. You don't need the fancy apps, this, that, and the other, because the fancy apps don't
if
turn you
it's
over.
just obstructive.
Bingo. And now Jay can get
Yeah.
into the serious stuff that
Now,
has nothing to do with what I just said.
obstructive apnea, you just have to open up the airway. And
Yeah.
they can do that with a dental appliance. They can do it
Yeah.
with positive airway pressure, CPAP, BiPAP, AutoPAP. There's a lot of different devices.
Or
But
sleeping on
there's
this side.
also central apnea.
Yeah.
And central apnea, your brain is not telling your body to breathe.
Yeah.
And you
Dangerous.
have to wake up enough to breathe, but you don't wake up enough to like wake up and go, "Oh, I'm awake." So your nocturnal sleep doesn't give you the deep sleep and the REM sleep that you need
Mhm.
because you're constantly waking up to breathe. And those individuals end up having severe apnea, and they have to have a breathing machine. There's no
Yeah.
dental appliance that can end up making. I mean, if your body's not telling you to breathe, it doesn't matter how open the airway is, you're just not going to be breathing.
Yeah. Jay, what
So,
would you imagine the percentage of individuals with that condition was? I mean, I threw out a number, because I find that
yeah, there's probably 90%
yeah,
of
yeah,
obstructive for 10% of the central. It's not
yeah,
as common,
yeah.
but there's quite often a mix.
Hmm.
And the mix might be most of the time it's obstructive, but occasionally it's central. And
Hmm.
for those, they have to be on a breathing machine.
Yeah.
There's no opening of the airway again because sometimes you just don't breathe.
Hmm.
Um, uh, we monitor leg movement.
Hmm.
Restless leg syndrome
Hmm.
screws up your sleep just as bad as apnea does,
Yeah.
but it has nothing to do with breathing.
Hmm.
So you can hook up your thumb for oxygen and there's something on your throat to see whether you're actually breathing or not. And you can get an Apple Watch 10 that will hypothesize that you had an apnea. That's a detection that's on the Apple Watch 10 now. And you know you can Aura rings will tell you that you were hypoxic. Um, there's a lot of things that you can use to monitor the difficulty that happens when you're not breathing. But it's not just breathing that can end up goofing up your sleep.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, you know, again, and by the way, positionally, we used to, when somebody was just a supine obstructor, we would tell them to sew a tennis ball between the shoulder blades on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Same
You can
principle.
now get a commercial device that's a tennis ball between the t-shirt shoulder blades, but you know, it's not a tennis ball. It's actually it's harder and nastier than a tennis ball, but you won't lay on your back because you got this knot
Yeah.
sticking you right between the shoulder blades. So you roll onto your back, you go, oh, geez, and you roll over the rest of the way.
Yeah, and it
And
takes around 3 weeks to train yourself into another sleep position because back
yeah,
sleepers want to be on their back. So it takes around 3 weeks.
yeah.
You have to know
Well,
that.
back to the recent headlines. The reason I bring it up to connect the dots of mental health is they're showing a relationship. I feel like Anthony Ramos. There's a relation. Anthony, I love you, baby. There's a real there's a relationship between the protein tau in the brain, Alzheimer's, and sleep apnea. I don't know how the correlation, but people
Well,
are
I mean, going bigger picture, if you don't have sleep, you don't have anything. Okay, so let's go into age ranges where you're not worried about dementia. You know, a little munchkin
Yeah.
who isn't sleeping, what's their focus going to be at school? That's not ADHD. Okay,
Let's
somebody who has a major mood issue in adolescence,
yeah.
that's lack of sleep, right? All of this stuff. So yeah, of course, going up the age scale, if you have a deficit, it's kind of like having a nutritional deficit for the
Yeah.
majority of your life. It's going to really catch up with you.
So when you go to sleep, there's some parts of sleep that are needed for you.
Mhm.
Slow wave sleep happens more at the beginning of the night. You have 90-minute cycles, you have slow wave and REM in them. But the first part of the night, you mostly get slow wave. The last part of the night, you mostly get REM. The slow wave sleep isn't just there for your entertainment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an essential part of your body. You're releasing growth hormone during slow wave sleep. Now, Pete, you're a big guy, but you're not growing any bigger. Your bone ends have sealed. You're as big as you're going to get as far as bone size.
exception of my
Um,
gut.
your growth hormone isn't making you bigger, but is cleaning out the cells. Cellular metabolism, at night in your sleep, your cells throw out the trash and somebody's got to pick it up.
Yeah.
And if you don't have slow wave sleep, the garbage collectors aren't coming by and picking it up, and you collect crap in your cells.
Good analogy, Jay. Good.
So, in the morning, when you look out the front door, you got all the garbage stacked up and nobody's come by. You're
Mm.
still full of it. So it
I'm always
collects.
full of it, Jay. Just ask my wife.
Yeah.
You can ask any of my exes,
Oh, that too.
and
I'm
I,
fantastic. I just want to put that out there,
Of
right?
course. That's why we're all in mental
Hey,
health.
don't laugh so hard.
so the sleep is an essential.
Yeah.
And if you're not sleeping well, your memory's not going to work well. Your cognitive processes are going to decline.
Yeah.
And not everybody who's not sleeping well is going to end up with Alzheimer's, but they're going to end up with somtimers. You
Yeah.
know, there's going to be sometimes that things just aren't clicking because you didn't sleep well enough to end up, having restorative sleep.
Yeah.
Restorative sleep restores you. It it
Mhm.
it it sets you back up to be a player again.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
it's the way
elite
Jake.
athletes notice that they can't sleep well, they won't be elite.
Yeah.
And if they're not sleeping well, they actually have studied that you have to sleep well in order to get the growth hormone to recover from the wear and tear of the workout, to grow that connection so you remember what the hell the coach taught you,
And then you get
all of
knocked
that.
in the head.
Yeah, and a blow to the head does not help all that process.
Nope.
So
You just sleep for 20 minutes or so and then you're fine. Yeah. But I think the key here is that it's two-pronged. One is the effect of a not sleeping an evening, which will completely take you off your game, whether it's focus or mood or what have you, even appetite, right? And then there's the long run that Jay was talking about in terms of the brain not attending to itself during the sleep cycle in terms of,
But where's that nasty protein? Like, what do you think the link is on that? Just not enough oxygen? Spitballing here.
synuclein for Parkinson's and tau for Alzheimer's. There's all sorts of nasty neurochemistry that can end up catching up with you if it's not cleaned out.
Yeah.
Your body has to end up having the janitorial service come by and take care of things, otherwise you're going to degrade.
Think of
You
your
know,
brain like a fish tank. Okay. If you know the little fishies are pooping in there, there's nothing wrong with the little fishies, but nobody's cleaning up that tank. That water's going to get pretty icky.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Third thing
Hey,
on
Jay
the
started with the garbage truck. I just went for it.
so,
Jay, last thing, because I've still got politics on the mind. Elon Musk, your buddy, has come to mind, and he said at the age of 6, he knew his brain was unlike anybody else's because he could not keep all of these ideas out of his head on what to do. What do you think was going on in his brain that he has evolved into whatever he is now? What do you think happened?
I haven't seen his brain.
Good answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen his behavior.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
expect his brain is divergent because his behavior is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
And
think,
until I see his brain activity, I won't know exactly
Yeah.
what's going on. I can make wild guesses, but wild guesses
The
aren't
par
what I
let's
usually
let's
talk
just
about.
our hypothetical parlor trick. He's a male. He's about 55 or so, and he constantly has ideas to do something new or to be disruptive.
So
yeah, but he follows through
impulsivity,
on them.
hyperactivity,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of, just because you're inattentive and
Yeah.
impulsive and hyperactive doesn't mean you're not still bright.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and not every idea that he's doing was his idea.
Very true. Very true.
A lot of what he's doing are things he was able to invest in
Hmm.
and end up taking over. And
Hmm.
investing in something and taking it over doesn't always yield success. I I think he's lost, I don't know what, $40 billion or something like that on buying X and building up their office in San Francisco and
But that was a
illegally putting a
political
giant
move,
X
Jay.
on the
Jay,
roof and
I
having
was
to take it down.
What
And
about Bill
that
Gates?
that was that was a political move. I just have to interject there. You know,
What do you
look where
think?
that got him. I think that was how he wanted
yeah,
Trump back on Twitter. That's what that move was about. Sorry, that wasn't a financial
Is
move
it
as well.
is it
well, it wasn't a good financial move, I'll
Yeah,
guarantee
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And
I don't think he does things for financial moves. I think he does
Well,
things
not
for greater
anymore.
good. But
and
Yeah.
how
he's impulsive in his behaviors, and um, I
Well,
I can't work with somebody who's that kind of a person
mhm.
because I can't be around something that is that unpredictable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one
But
of the
then
things.
he's always going to find somebody who will work under him.
Mhm.
There's always people that will want to work, and obviously the hostile environment didn't drive everybody out. So
Yeah, well, I mean,
well, as
many
far as
lawyer
we know,
firms and whatnot are very hostile. But one of the things I want to kind of throw in is I was talking about follow through. You know, a key successor in when we talk about these minds that are very busy, tons and tons of ideas. I mean, everybody is not saying the word ADHD here, but the key differentiator of success and not having success is the follow through of the ideas or
yeah,
having somebody within your scope, so hiring somebody to do the follow through. That's the difference between success and lack of success for individuals with air quote ADHD. Okay. Another differentiator is risk. Risk taking, where we always talk about the impulsivity of ADHD and the risk. Successful people take incredible risks. Unsuccessful people take incredible risks. And then there's the whole middle who takes no risks at all. And quite frankly, they're a little bit boring. Um, and they don't tend to be that happy either. But the differentiator in the risk taking is that the risk is calculated,
yeah.
right? And if
Uh,
hypothesis.
we're
and
talking
and
about, yeah. Hmm.
most entrepreneurs start many companies that don't
Yeah.
actually fully succeed. And I would point to his boring company.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah.
Vegas
You
loves
know,
Yeah.
yeah. There are people walking around down in the tunnels, pooping and peeing, and the cars down in the tunnels aren't.
What headlines are you reading,
It's
Jay?
it's not really a great circumstance in Vegas. It's like a little driving slow through a tunnel in Vegas. Um, it's a more of a touristy thing than
Proof of
something that's
concept,
actually
Jay.
of any
Come on.
use,
Okay.
you know.
Mm.
So yeah, and they basically have shelved the Boring Company. It's not really making money as a
But
corporate
when you
entity.
have that amount of money, you can take more and more risk. And I think that's also part of calculated risk. We talk about, how people go more mad with time and money. That running joke, what's the difference between an eccentric and somebody who's got a few screws loose? And the saying used to be $1 million. Now I would say it's $1 billion, right? There's an affordability to risk
Well,
taking at a certain
well,
rate.
here
So
let's
it's not just the brain here; it's the culture, it's the money,
let's
it's
connect the dots because we're on Vegas. What about Howard Hughes?
ah, yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I know from
He
reading about him, but he definitely had some severe phobias.
well, he
Uh,
took the money they got from his dad for making that oil drill, and then he
yeah,
went out and did all these ventures.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Any thoughts on what was going on up?
yeah. Some of his ventures worked, and some of them like sort of didn't.
like
Spruce
Uh,
Goose?
really
uh, uh,
crashed.
uh,
Yeah,
the spruce goose. I mean, he flew it like that far above the water in order to get paid finally, and I don't think there's anybody else other than him that would have been trying to fly it. You know, it's he was an interesting character. Definitely not probably neurotypical,
yeah,
uh, but a lot of great. Tesla was so far from being neurotypical. He
yeah,
was
yeah.
kind of a paranoid genius,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, but he turned out a lot of very good things.
Yeah,
You know, all of our alternating current. If it weren't for him, Edison would have had us with DC currents in the house, which a slight short of some sort burned the house down. I mean,
Jay Edison.
AC isn't cheap either, but with DC current as the method to provide power, it really wouldn't work. You can't transport DC from point A to point B without too much loss.
Well,
AC
you need a whole
yeah,
bunch
you
of
can use.
generators, and Edison and Tesla went at it.
yeah.
Edison killed an elephant on stage to show the ills of AC. That's how it's always been screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But going to the big point though, that, any level of genius is backed by obsession. Okay. And I talk about a lot when working with children, direction versus correction. Okay. What, where is that obsession or that drive targeted to? Is it washing your hands 80 times a day, or is it spending 80 hours a week just going nuts, going for something and sleeping in between?
yeah.
Well, the
Well,
dreaming, can't you solve problems with the dreams?
Yeah.
Isn't
I
that
always say you need
processing?
it,
hyper.
it, if you've got the material in there already, all the creativity that's done in dreams isn't just dreaming,
Yeah,
it's working hard and having the information in your head and having the dreams derubricize it
yeah,
so that it can reintegrate
yeah.
in a new way.
Hmm.
And sleep does that.
Yeah,
It allows you to juggle categories, wiping away your existent barriers from connections between thoughts, and then suddenly, bing, things work.
Yeah.
Organic chemistry, all the chemistry was all linear, zigzag pieces, and the chemist going home on the streetcar dozed off, started to see little fuzzy balls in his sleep, and they bumped into each other and stuck like carbon molecules sticking to carbon molecules. And then finally, they made a chain and they played crack the whip, and the end came around and hooked. And there was the carbon ring. And he popped out of his dream going, damn, it's a ring, the carbon ring, and that organic chemistry basically came out of that. But he was already working on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The sewing machine, similar.
Yeah.
The he
Input,
goes to
output.
sleep, and he's got to finish his invention, and he imagines he's actually in a gigantic pot about to be boiled to death by natives of some sort, and they come at him with a spear with a hole in the end instead of a hole up at the other end, and he wakes up going, damn, put the hole for the thread at the end, so, and but these
Games of
things are,
Thrones.
you know, the dreams break down barriers, and they allow reintegration.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, derubricizing, breaking down categories. Rubrics are categories, names that you categorize something as. If you break that down, things can
Yeah.
fit back together in a novel way.
Mm-hmm.
And dreaming is not a waste of time.
Nope. 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 Nope.
It's REM sleep, which obviously REM sleep was the thing that Joe Camilla saw. There's a brain rhythm that corresponds with a psychological state, and he was looking to see if there was a psychological correlate of alpha. He was just looking for us. Can you differentiate when you're in alpha versus not? And luckily, his first subject got it 100% correct.
Yeah.
Never since then did he ever find anybody that was that good. And it was just, you know, serendipity. His first subject was somebody who could identify alpha perfectly,
Yeah.
So
And the
anyway,
last thing, and we'll split. The brain structure, it could be different than somebody else's brain on the genius side because we did a show on Albert Einstein. Jay, if you just want to sum that up real quick.
Hmm.
yeah, brains are morphologically unique. We have generalized similarities, but they are quite unique. Some people's cingulate is one smooth thing. Some of them have two portions, some of them have three portions. We don't even know what the significance of that is. You know, we have observed that difference, but we don't really know what is the difference for.
Yeah.
Um, we only recently looked at the difference between male and female, and structurally they're very different. And it took quite a while for a database in EEG to end up actually separating male and female with enough people to end up making a comparison. You can't compare a handful of people to a database full of people and make any kind of a comparison. You have to have a similar number to make a valid comparison. So until there was actually a full database of male and a full database of female, you couldn't really see the differences in an accurate way at all. And people just lumped them all together in some big unique database. So,
But I mean,
Well,
it's the combination, right? It's what you're born with and then what you do with it. I mean, it's a form of the epigenetics that if you're born with something and then you use it and you use it and you train it and you train it, we know a lot in terms of coordination. We know a lot in terms of spatial planning and organization. That there's all kinds of evidence and just the simple things of individuals that have, we used to call it talent. You have talent, and then you exercise it. You gain discipline in the region of the brain for that talent, and you have various types of quote unquote geniuses, but I think you have to have something to start.
Well, Dr. Marie, you have a safe trip now.
Thank
And
you.
what's the name of it again?
Pick up a penny
Pick
in
up a penny.
Newcastle, England. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then Jake Unkelman, thank you again for another great show and for joining us on the Q&A like you both do every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Time. We had another rousing discussion of which we continued on over here. The last thing, Jay, is could you please tell your fellow Californians to please get their votes in? I got some money on the popular vote, and I'd like to collect.
In California, it takes time to count everything, and even local elections here in Vallejo for the city council, the two leaders are like 200 votes apart, but there's only 60% of the vote that's been fully counted yet. So, but that they count off the upper offices before they count off all the
Does this mean
local
there's
things.
still a
So,
chance it could be reversed? Could it? Could it? Could it?
you know,
I think my internet connection is wonky.
luckily, the system works and it's reproducible. Um, I got an email that said that they were sending me a ballot and that I should receive it in a few days. And if you don't, call this number. And a few days later, my ballot showed up. And you go through the pamphlet that tells you what all the uh, propositions are about, because there's a lot of foolishness that goes on in propositions.
I can't believe.
But you go through and you mark your ballot and you send it in. I get an email saying that they received it in the mail, and then I get one that says they've received it and they're counting it.
Yeah.
So, uh,
I
you know,
mail in voted. I'm a big proponent of it. I didn't know everybody in California does a mail in vote. Did not know.
yeah, yeah, it's a
Those
wonderful
crowded
system.
highways.
The state told me that my ballot was received, and then the county told me that it was received
Yeah.
and counted. So, it's tracked and it's tracked and it's tracked,
That's a lot
and
of administration. Oh, I diverse.
it's all computerized administration too, you know. So,
All right. Poli- uh, the political week is now over. We'll get back to terms. I'm sure your business will pick up, Dr. Marie, all the people that left the United States because they don't like who the new president is.
Oh, we're going to see
uh,
some applications. We're going to see some applications, that's for
It's a
sure.
good time to have a podcast.
Yeah.
you know, the take my ball and go somewhere else thing after a political election is just foolishness. But the world's full of
Does that mean I
fools.
shouldn't announce we're hiring?
Well, you can announce that you're hiring and bring in
Tax for
somebody
60%.
perfectly good, but Canada doesn't just let you come in.
Oh, I know. I mean, we've had issues that the last time Trump got in, or if he got in, people said, "Well, we'll just move to Canada." It's like the U.S. really has an issue with somebody saying, "I'll just move to the U.S." But in terms of the belief that if you are a U.S. citizen, you can just move anywhere, it's an
Yeah.
interesting phenomenon for anybody who does not have U.S. citizenship to
So
to witness.
I,
Yeah,
you know, I hear all the concern over border security.
yeah,
But in North Dakota, there are borders where you drive across the border and there's a little kiosk and you stop and you put your thumb on a deal and you smile and they take a picture of you and
yeah,
you drive off. There's nobody there to check anything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they don't even, I mean, if you don't stop, I guess they get a picture of your license plate, but I mean, there's nothing stopping anybody there.
Mhm.
It's North
Well,
Dakota. There's nobody there to stop you.
Yeah.
You
Well, I mean, there
know,
shouldn't be, largest open border on the planet. It always had a beauty to it. Let's put it that way.
For everybody that's got a problem with the politics, I invite everybody to watch John Adams on HBO. This stuff has been going on since the founding fathers put this stuff together. Chillax, it's going to be all right. We're good. And there's always Canada for you. Jake, Dr. Marie, have a great weekend. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.